Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we are going to put your language skills to the absolute ultimate test. Today, we're taking a look at a 10-question advanced grammar challenge, and this is all based on some fantastic insights from English with Lucy. So whether you're an English learner aiming for total fluency or, a native speaker who just wants to polish up your prose, this is going to be a lot of fun.
So let me ask you, do you honestly think you're good at English grammar? We are about to find out. I'm challenging you to see if you can score a perfect 10 out of 10 on these questions today. And hey, quick warning for the native speakers tuning in. If you're sitting there right now thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to ace this, no problem, don't be so sure. A lot of dedicated English learners might actually completely outscore you today.
Here is our roadmap for the challenge. We'll start with round 1, common word traps. Then round 2, structural gymnastics. Round 3 is the rule benders. And finally, leveling up your English.
All right, let's kick things off right away with round 1, common word traps.
Here is question number 1. Listen closely to this sentence. Tim or myself will lead the meeting today. I'll give you just a moment to pause and ponder that. Where exactly is the mistake there?
Well, if you guessed it, myself is the problem, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. The correct phrase is actually Tim or I. And honestly, this is just an incredibly common mistake. You will constantly hear native speakers making this exact error in professional settings and emails and just in everyday conversation.
In fact, our source material includes a pretty hilarious confession from the creator. She admits that even her own husband makes this mistake sometimes. She kind of jokes about how embarrassing it is, adding that he could even write would've and could've, which are 2 other notorious grammar traps, by the way, and she'd still love him. It really just goes to show how deeply ingrained these errors can be for all of us.
But why exactly is it wrong? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the rule of reflexive pronouns. A reflexive pronoun, like the word myself, is used as the object of a sentence, but strictly only when the subject and the object refer to the very same person. In our sentence, we actually need a subject pronoun, which is I. So Tim or I will lead the meeting. It is such a widespread mistake that linguists joke it might literally just become accepted as correct in the distant future.
Okay, moving on to question 2. Which of these is correct? Every evening, I like to lay in the hammock or lie in the hammock. And right along those same lines, do you lay a dress on the bed or lie a dress on the bed?
There's a really crucial distinction here. Lie means to be in or to get yourself into a flat position. And the key thing is, it does not need an object. Therefore, you lie in the hammock. By contrast, lay means to put something else in a flat position, usually gently, and it absolutely must be followed by an object. So you lay the dress on the bed. The dress is the object in that scenario.
Let's finish up round 1 with question number 3. If you're recovering from an illness, do you get the flu over or do you get over the flu? Well, the correct answer is that you get over the flu. And this is because get over, when we're talking about recovering from being sick, is a non-separable phrasal verb. You cannot separate the verb and its particle by shoving the object, in this case, the flu, right between them. The object just has to stay at the very end of the phrase.
So, how are you doing so far? Anyone still holding on to a perfect score? Let's step up the difficulty and move to round 2, structural gymnastics.
Here is question 4. Listen to this sentence and see if you can fill in the blank. Blank Molly to resign, who'd replace her? What word is missing at the start there? I'll give you a few seconds to figure out the formal word that belongs in that space.
The answer is were. Were Molly to resign, who'd replace her? Now, what's really fascinating about this is the grammatical term for it, an inverted conditional. In second conditional sentences, we can completely strip away the word if and instead use the structure were plus the subject plus the to infinitive. It's like a linguistic magic trick that instantly elevates the sentence, giving it a much more formal, elegant tone.
For question 5, let's try another structural flip. Imagine you have 2 sentences. He didn't only wear mismatched socks, and he also forgot to brush his teeth. How do you combine those elegantly? You use an inversion with a negative adverbial. Not only did he wear mismatched socks, but he also forgot to brush his teeth. By putting not only right at the beginning, we actually switch the normal order of the subject and the auxiliary verb. It's just a really fantastic way to add some punch and emphasis to your writing.
All right, for question 6, we have a classic structural debate. Which of these is correct? To whom does this jacket belong, or who does this jacket belong to?
Well, I have to confess, this is a bit of a trick question because both are technically fine, but they serve totally different purposes. The version using whom right after the preposition to is technically the most correct traditional form. However, it's incredibly formal. In modern spoken and even written English, the version ending the sentence with the preposition to, who does this jacket belong to, is vastly more common and entirely acceptable today.
And that brings us right into round 3, the rule benders.
Question 7 focuses on collective nouns. If you are talking about a restless crowd of people, do you say the crowd is getting restless or the crowd are getting restless? Go ahead and choose your verb.
Well, the answer is both, but it entirely depends on where you are. So the crucial point here is that crowd is a collective noun, meaning it refers to a group as one single entity. In British English, speakers often treat collective nouns as either singular or plural, so is and are both work perfectly well over there. However, in American English, people generally treat collective nouns strictly as singular, meaning they are much more likely to use is.
Let's quickly tackle questions 8 and 9, which brilliantly illustrate just how flexible English really is. Question 8, a historic day versus an historic day. Now, you were probably taught in school to use a before consonants and an before vowels, right? Since historic starts with a consonant H, ahistoric is standard in writing. But depending on your pronunciation, specifically if you have an accent that drops the H sound, saying an historic is entirely fine and frankly just easier to say. And for question 9, think about the word will. We always think of it for the future tense, right? But you can actually use it for habits. If you say, our neighbor will play heavy metal all night long, heavily emphasizing the word will, you are actually describing a present, incredibly annoying habit.
Okay, for our final challenge, question 10, the absolute drama of the punctuation world, the Oxford comma. When you have a list of things, using a comma right before the final and is heavily preferred in American English. But leaving that comma out is much more common in British English, especially for short lists. So, which one is correct? Again, both are. The ultimate rule of the Oxford comma is simply to choose one style and be entirely 100% consistent with it throughout whatever you're writing.
And that concludes our 10 questions. Let's jump into our final section, leveling up your English.
If you loved diving into these tricky little nuances today, our source material highlights a couple of amazing resources for you. For those aiming for true advanced C1 fluency, there's the beautiful British English C1 program. It features pronunciation lessons, listening and reading delivered through this really cool interactive story format, and a private course community to practice with. Also, don't forget that the creator offers a free supplementary PDF that goes into even more depth with interactive activities to help you literally memorize these exact rules for life.
So, I have to ask, how did you do? How many did you get right out of 10? Were you a perfect 10, or did the whole hammock situation or the Oxford comma trip you up a bit? I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. We spend so much time trying to perfect our grammar, but as we saw with words like whom, regional differences, and shifting habits, the English language is incredibly fluid. It really begs the question, are grammatical rules absolute, set in stone forever, or are they always evolving based on how we actually speak to one another? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the rules.